am very pleased to introduce Forrest Mars. He's a hypermedia architect and CTO of LocalVox Media, which is a platform for small and medium businesses and local businesses. He lives down in Manhattan, and he is the co-author of the Definitive Guide to Drupal 7. And so he also speaks Joomla. So it's a rare person. Yeah, it's a rare person who hangs out with Joomla people and speaks Drupal. So we thought it would be interesting to have him down and tell us all about Drupal, Joomla, and the end of the internet. Thank you, Forrest.
Thanks very much.
Yay. Okay.
It's a really great intro and a conference too. And yes, I do speak Joomla, although with a very, very heavy accent. And so today we're going to talk about both Drupal and Joomla. And we're also going to touch on something that I've referred to in the past and refer to today as the end of the internet. Right here we're going to start with a picture of some of our favorite people in the world here, all dressed up as the Rude Mechanicals. Does anyone know what who the Rude Mechanicals are? Rude Mechanicals were from Midsummer's Night's Dream, and they're the traveling players that put on the story of Pyramus and Thisbe for in their version. The Beatles actually dressed up as the Rude Mechanicals. And a lot of times I feel like Joomla and Drupal are playing out the part of Pyramus and Thisbe, and they're listening at the wall to each other and looking through the cracks and trying to figure out what's going on the other side, and don't really know and only catching little rumors. And they're of course kept apart by their horrible parents, because they will not let them see each other. They would, except there's these forces that are in the way of conspiring to keep them apart. And of course, eventually they do meet. We all know how that ended with the lion. I won't give away the end of the story as to if anyone has any speculation on who or what the lion is in this story. Let me know. But we're going to kind of approach this as a sort of an inquire within about everything. Does anyone know about inquire within about everything? Maybe that's actually an informative book published a couple centuries ago. It was in the 19th century that was designed to be an informative guide about a whole variety of subjects that were of interest to the Victorians, whether it was etiquette or the new industrial age, all these things. And Tim Berners-Lee, when he was putting the web together, used it as an inspiration. And in fact, his first word name for the World Wide Web was not the World Web, but it was Enquire, based on this book. So we're going to kind of do a viral brain dump to give you a broad overview, but also some deep knowledge on Drupal. And we'll start with where it came from, but along the way, we're going to touch on a lot of stuff. And I'm going to keep in mind the kind of rule for giving presentations that you should use a minimum number of slides, maybe like just a few really important slides, and then as soon as, now that we're all aware that's a really good rule for presentations, then I'm going to be very aware of how badly I break it, because we're just going to really blaze through a lot of stuff. So this is actually the complete web page that you would see if you had gone to a site called drop.org, drop.org, anytime in the past, say, 10 years. And drop.org is the home of Drupal. Probably, I'm guessing that very few people, if any, know the story of where Drupal came from. So Drupal was originally created not necessarily as a content management system, but it was actually created as a communications layer riding on top of an application, of a communications network protocol. It was started in a dorm room at Antwerp, where back in around 1999, where the internet connectivity was really hard to come by in the dorm room. And there was a group of about 8 friends, and one of them had a super high-speed connection in his dorm room. So he decided to share with all his friends, and so they built out this network so they could share the Wi-Fi through all of them, and they realized that they all were on the same network. They all were using it all the time, and they had absolutely no way to talk to each other. And this is a problem that is very similar to a lot of the problems that Nicholas Negroponte, who was the director of the MIT Media Lab for a long time, points out. That it happened for years. We had all this magnificent technology, and we'd all get in the same room, and we're like, hey, I need that file. And we're like, oh, okay, let me configure something. Wait, no, okay, can you hook up? No, that's the wrong wire. Oh, you don't have that connection protocol. Oh, you're on Windows, I'm on Mac. And you're like, some of the, the most expensive, back in the days when computers were $10,000, and you're like some of the smartest guys in the room, and all they need to do is share one file, and they're completely stymied, right? It's, the technology becomes so sophisticated, you have these problems you can't solve. When was the last time that you interact with someone with your smartphone, and you said, hey, what's your number? Hey, what's your number? Okay, I got it. You have the fastest, 3G, 4G networks in the world. You have the smartest phones, right? Has anyone here been used Bump? Okay, we got a couple people at least tried it, but I mean, this seems like this is one of the most fundamental things your smartphone should be doing. Is you should be able to say, hi, what's your phone number? Here it is, you've got it, I've got it. We just exchange contact information. The most fundamental operations is completely not that. So anyway, so they built this communication network so they could all talk to each other, and then they went to register a domain, and they registered, you know, it was a college, they probably had a few beers, and they wanted to register the Belgian word dorp, D-O-R-P, and oops, they accidentally registered drop.org. Well, dorp and dorp would be two different things. Dorp means community. It literally is the Belgian word for village, and that's what they were trying, that's what they envisioned, this village thing, but they actually kind of, they kind of fumbled the registration, and so they ended up with this word drop, and then they back translated it back into Belgian from English, and they got the word Drupal. Drupal means drop. Dorp means village. So there's actually nothing to do with drops and the guy with the drop picture and all this. This was all completely accidental. It should have been a village. But this does look oddly familiar. Huh.
Right.
You know, I've always suspected this. So we're gonna kind of compare it. You rats. Who did that? No, I don't know what, but it's a striking similarity. So I would love to hear people's ideas of, as we compare and contrast Joomla. How do you think? I mean, I think we all have a basic idea of what the differences and similarities are. But if we had to come up with some words, why don't people shout out some words to describe each of them? I'm just going to do it there and there. Just shout them out.
Round.
Round?
Yeah.
Round. Well, which who gets round? Oh. I don't mean the logos. I mean the this is going to be for the trademark lawyers. No, but just people's conceptions. I mean, you work with Joomla every day, so you have a sense of it, and we know that Drupal is, you know, what is it? How do you think of these?
Powerful.
Okay, so we got powerful over here. This is a word I'm constantly telling the president of my company to stop putting in our literature.
And it also goes under Joomla.
Oh, okay. Well, let's take the differences. Okay, we'll put them here. You're just saying that. Give me a better word than that. Let's get this.
She's
Okay.
inspired.
Okay. Anyone else?
More PHP. That's my
More
perception.
PHP. Okay, there we go. Greater PHP. Anybody else?
My perception is that it's tackier. Drupal is
Tackier.
Tackier.
Let's say tackier.
No. I already gave up the
Drupal
round.
is
I'm
more
done.
Round.
encompassing.
Round.
It is round.
Round.
But it's encompassing.
All right. Let
Governmental. It's encompassing all. So instead
Just
of
shout them
having-
out.
Okay. Everybody's ready.
Oh, there we go. Okay. So here we go. It's encompassing. There's Laura's encompassing.
Encompassing all.
Enterprise. Anything else on the Joomla side? Because let's see, can we? I mean, because if it
I have
obviously
one
more
for
PHP,
Drupal.
we got less PHP. Are we saying it's less
I have
techy?
one for Drupal, it's expensive.
Expensive. Okay.
Commercial?
Why does an enterprise belong also under Joomla? I just read.
Why
an
doesn't
article
it?
that
Yeah,
says
that's a really
ready
good
for the
question.
enterprise.
That's a very good question. So here are some words that I kind of think have a little bit to do with have Drupal. Written in PHP, which originally did stand for personal homepage. It's a language designed mainly to serve up images of cute cats and other sorts of memes, power up various Facebook-like platforms. A language related, referred to by one senior Drupal developer as offensive to all reasonable people. So that's actually what they have in common. Drupal may use a little more PHP, but it's a social publishing framework. It's a set of tools to automate site administration, and it doesn't necessarily entail. It allows you to build entire applications without writing the entire stack yourself. Now, if you put it all together, you've got a social publishing tool that powers some of the biggest and most known sites on the web. Now, one of the interesting things that I've discovered is it turns out that Drupal runs a lot of these main sites. And then I was looking and I see there's a lot of companies that are using Joomla. They're not necessarily using it to power their main site, which is an interesting difference, because when you get these big companies, I mean, they all have like little departments here and there that are using various things. You may find, using Typo 3 or something. But I think at the end of the day, it's where they're all going, where converging, because companies cannot be so stratified with their technology. For some reason, I think this is running slowly because my notes are not appearing. It's quite possible. Oh, this is this weird slide. Sorry, there's one of these slides got weird. So first and foremost, Drupal is a web application framework that leverages a social publishing platform to power some of the biggest sites on the web. but scales down to more modest requirements, as well. We say that it scales down as opposed to it scales up because you really can't take a system that's intended to power small websites and deploy it to enterprise-level solution for your top 1,000 companies. But you can engineer a robust and performant platform that meets the needs of enterprise deployments. How? By raising the pain threshold on smaller developers, right? So that's why we say it scales down. You can't, it's very hard to scale something small up. You can take something big and you can scale it down, but what's going to happen is you're going to raise the pain threshold. It may cost more money. You may have to learn more about PHP. You may have to be techier to get into the enterprise. All those words that you throw out, they're exactly correct. Those perceptions are correct. But how much that threshold of pain is raised is in fact the heart of the debate, which is still raging in Drupal between business and community values, the tension between that is pulling Drupal in opposing directions, and it's just one of such many tensions in Drupal, and I'm sure as well as many other technology communities. And I think it's recognizing the tensions that are pulling at your technology, your code base, your platform, and your community. That's one of the most important things you can do to find a successful path forward. You have to identify those tensions. It's not so much a question of, oh, what do we do? It's a question of what's happening to us, what are the directions being pulled, and how to reconcile that. And these tensions that are happening in the Drupal community are part of a debate, which is, big sites, do they require big skills? The tools, the techniques, the secret sauce, how do you bootstrap it into a full stack? And to build in Drupal, do you have to be a superhero? Apparently you have to be a superhero to see this slide. Okay, let's hit that button to see if that does anything. Okay, so we missed a slide there. It's just completely off the scale. There it is. So there we go. So a lot of times, all of this whole cluster of knowledge we find referred to somewhat obliquely as the Drupal way, which seems to be oftentimes just a snarky response for why things don't work exactly as you expected them to. Oh, it's just, oh, thank you. That's much, much, much better. But if you're comparing it to WordPress or whatever, looking at a LAMP stack solution, it seems silly to talk about its learning curve unless you're talking about performance optimization or other high-level optimizations, architecture, database, the so-called theoretical considerations of object orientation. Raising the pain threshold and the Drupal way is a little thing that you may have referred to as the Drupal learning curve. And this is going to suck if all of my slides are off. I should probably try to quickly reset because we're losing the bottoms of the slides, which actually has some really good information. So I'm going to quickly just jump in here and see if we can get a better display size over here. Just don't know where my cursor is. Does anyone see my cursor? There it is.
Look under your bed.
There we go. So there's my arrangement with this guy up top. Oh, I can't put him up top. Up top never works. Does everyone experience that on the Mac? You can't move your cursor past the title bar? No, you haven't experienced that. Okay. Well, this is.
You want to just mirror?
No, I'm losing my notes.
I'll show you the Keynote app after this.
Okay. Well, that's actually not going to happen because that's not going to happen. So we'll just get out of there. Try to get my cursor back. And just get my cursor. Okay. Well, now we're at a standstill. I really have completely lost my cursor.
Cursor was there for a second.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, there we go. And where?
Well, it showed up at top of the center square rectangle.
It was in the corner of my
Oh, this is
top.
funny. This is hilarious. No, I literally am just trying to close this box. I'm just trying to close the
Command Tab, so where you need to go?
Yeah, it's not. No, that section. That section not doing it. There we go. Some of these conferences they actually have. I think they must not do or something.
I think Jill's on vacation.
But I literally have completely lost my presentation. It is minimized. Anyone know the Apple command for this? Quite silly.
For which?
To unminimize.
Yeah.
You're not using line, right?
What's that?
Are you using line?
No, I'm not. But I absolutely have no idea now how to.
That's the presentation.
Kind of
Command Tab doesn't get you there?
It looks more more drag because I minimized.
Unplug the external monitor, find your stuff, and plug
Yeah,
it back
that's
in.
gonna be. Yeah, we're gonna lose the whole thing.
It'll come back.
Yeah, there it is, just like that. I was afraid to plug it back in. This is why I have a Mac. This is what I'm talking about, technology being broken. The cursor just disappears, right? You know, like, where is the cursor? So, okay. So we're going to lose probably the bottom of a lot of the slides here. And we're going to go back to the learning curve. And I'll just read you some of the points on the learning curve. That'll be fine. Sorry about this. We do apologize for the technical difficulties. So this is the perfect model where you think, oh, this perfect web application framework, a CMS, you spin it up, you know, it's supposed to be so great. It really doesn't matter whether it's a content management system or a presentation system. And this is my own fault because I'm using all open source on this thing, right? I'm using Keynote, I'm using like OpenOffice, NeoOffice. Now it's LibreOffice. I mean, what's next, right? I mean, it just keeps going through these iterations, and then they lose developers, and it's like everybody contribute, right? And we have to like beat Word. Meanwhile, I mean, how many people know that Word, Microsoft Word, was actually illegal in the United States briefly for 6 months in 2010? Most people didn't know. Yeah, in January 2010, a federal judge in that wonderful district down in Texas, where they have all these sorts of cases, ruled that Microsoft was no longer allowed to sell Microsoft Word in the United States, and that appeal was not even processed until July. So from January to July, it was for Microsoft to sell. Now, of course, they didn't ban it from stores from selling it, right? Because then they'd be left holding the bag, right? They would have already paid Microsoft. And it has to do with an actual copyright violation of a Canadian company. It has to do with the way actually Microsoft embeds XML in documents. It's most of the way open source is. So if we were to see the whole slide, you would see you start at the bottom, and you've got below the I kick ass threshold. There's a threshold you can't see down here called the I suck threshold. And if you start out below that, you'll find out that you have to install and configure the Drupal core. That seems pretty simple, right? Install and configure. What could go wrong? Then you have to figure out the node system, and the node system. Like, why isn't it just the content system, right? The node system. What's a node? Then you've got a block system. It's very similar to the way modules work in Joomla. And you've got to learn about users, roles, and permissions and how they work. And then you install contributed themes and modules. All that's very, very similar to Joomla. All that's just to get you above the I suck threshold, right? And then once you're above the I suck threshold, you can do things like upgrading, patching, security monitoring, navigation menus, taxonomy, localization, internalization, really, really, really important. Drastically customize the front page, and then you've got your theme and template modifications. And then you can finally, you see I'm caught up here, you can actually get to the I kick-ass threshold, and then we start looking at things like contributing documentation back to being super important. Designing custom content type actions and workflows for a site, theme and module actually developing them, jQuery, which I hope actually a lot of people are already working with, Form API, contributing code, not documentation back, designs, patches, Drupal consulting, working for a Drupal shop, and then finally at the very top, you attain oneness with one of the top programs, CHFs. So what we're going to cover a lot of these steps, just kind of so that by the end of the session you understand what's involved. And we're going to do this because a lot of people find that Drupal doesn't have a learning curve; it has a learning brick wall. So something that we want to actually try to give you the information to avoid. You might feel like you're in an interactive puzzle sometimes with Drupal, where it's like, am I building a web management system, or is this some kind of bizarre, twisted, torturous online game? But for every person that says that Drupal is really, really hard, there's someone else that says something like Drupal makes the work on the site fun and keeps you motivated to go further and implement new stuff. Right? This is actually a Drupal site for a London development firm. That again, you can't see all of it. I'm not dare not to try to fix that. Here's another site. Anyone? What do people think of this one? Have people seen this site before?
Weren't they Joomla?
What's that?
They, look at my page for user group meeting and presented that it was a Joomla site. Did they just switch, like last year?
They didn't switch to Drupal?
I don't know, but that's
You sure about that?
No, that's Joomla.
His name's Chris.
That's Joomla.
I know, I really,
Yeah, it's Joomla.
I almost feel
Sorry,
like,
Forrest.
I almost feel like I have to brave the, if people, dare I brave the display thing again? What's the book? Should I, because we're missing half the slides here.
Oh, okay, start trying it.
I feel like I'm gonna do that. It's gonna be dangerous. I hope people will bear with me. Yeah.
But hey, is a part of Guggenheim the Drupal?
There we go.
Sure, could be.
Yeah, it can be, but I don't think so.
So the question is,
It's still Joomla.
okay, I know how to do this. I know how to do
Joomla, Guggenheim's Joomla.
Yeah.
There it is. It was on the. I had the orientation section backwards, and that is.
The White House is Joomla.
Doesn't that qualify as an
I know.
Oh yeah. So this is decided that it wanted to, even though I set it for like 1024, it decided that it was going to set it for
Enterprise at
That's just
4,500.
Jesus. Let's try that. Okay. Yeah, fancy, huh? Okay, so. Yeah, let's. And the problem before was I actually thought that I had that one on the right. It's actually on the left. So, and the problem that exemplifies is actually the slide we're on. And we're going to jump to that slide right now. Just give me a second. There we go. Come on, there we go. So, yes, I was on the right, not the left. You know, you could very easily make the assumption that Drupal has a learning brick wall, but it may turn out that other shops are finding it very easy. You may make the assumption that the Guggenheim has a really beautiful site on Drupal, and it may turn out that it's really a Joomla site. There's a lot of assumptions.
That's why you're supposed to keep coming to our New York meetings first.
Right. So we're going to make some assumptions here today that maybe you'll help me with. I'm going to assume that absolutely everyone in the room is familiar with what a CMS is, but I'm not necessarily going to assume that everyone in the room is familiar with a rapid development framework, or web application framework, or even a content management framework. I'm going to assume that everyone is familiar with a CMS in the ho-hum sense of, oh, I need to get some content up on the web, or it's really important that I get these pictures of cute cats on the web. The very ho-hum sense of what a CMS is. But what's happened is that Drupal and some other frameworks have evolved to play a crucial role, not just in getting cute cats on the web, but in the next generation of web services, and even the Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the web's conception of the GGG, which has nothing to do with being a game or giving, but is the giant global graph, which is to kind of reality what hyperlinks are to text, right? It's a complete comprehensive model of the world that is the next generation of the web's evolving to. So, we look at content management versus asset management. We ask ourselves, you know, what is content anyway? I mean, we might find that our conception of content is kind of subjective, right? It's like, oh, it's a web page, right? But lots of things can be displayed on a web page. Web service can be displayed on a web page. There's many things can be displayed on a web page. Is it an article? Is it a photo? What is content? At the end of the day, we might even decide that content has very little to do with the technical definition, and has a lot more to do with the definition of who owns what, or a way of framing things, or a way of handling it. You may also have heard that Drupal is moving to a web application framework, or actually a full stack framework called Symfony. Has anyone actually heard that announcement? Who's familiar with what a web application framework is? And a full stack framework, Glue framework. What we find is, you know, above the level where you have, or should say below the level where you have content management frameworks. Content management system is really kind of hand-wavy way of saying, oh, you have some content and you need to manage it, right? It's almost like it's self-referential. You just have pages, you get pictures, you just need to manage it. A framework is going to, a content management framework is going to allow you to build a CMS by exposing an API that you could then build against, and you can do things that go beyond simple content management. It may, in fact, offer you advanced request handling. It may offer you user management. It may, in fact, offer you things like data primitives. And if you get to glue frameworks, they take it to the next level, and they provide a more fundamental framework that takes a lot of those things, such as your data primitives, session handling, request handling, and they encapsulate in a way that allow you to quickly use them, but without having to do it their way. And examples of that would be Zen would be, it's a glue framework. It's not a full stack framework. Symfony is an example of a full stack framework. It's something that gives you all of that, but adds to it its own MVC implementation and other aspects that you have to use it. And not that there are only glue and full stack frameworks, there are those that you can use either way. They provide a glue framework or a full stack framework, and you can use their full implementation, or you can just borrow from the libraries to quickly build applications. So Drupal is now building on the is building on the Symfony framework. We're assuming that the interface is a rapidly changing target. What do we mean when we say that the interface is a rapidly changing target? We mean that obviously the web interfaces, both web-facing, public-facing, and the interfaces that you use, the IDE development environments, have changed very, very rapidly just over the period of time when you've been building web applications. We also mean that there are ongoing, raging debates over where things should be done. Should things be decided at a programmatic level, in a framework level? Should things be handled in a GUI? Should the programmatic system be made to be more human-friendly and do things in a way that people think about? Or should people learn to think more logically and think about things in a way? This is kind of the debate that goes on between what's called an experiential approach and a programmatic approach, and it has to do with whether you're concerned with issues such as usability and front end and intuitiveness, or whether you're concerned with issues of programmability, consistency, and the blatant disregard for the way people really use things. Right? So, this is, I mean, and this is another example of one of these tensions that pulls out. So, who here is familiar with Quarks mode? Quarks mode is kind of really important. Modernizer JS. Got a few more. Who here uses jQuery? How about Hick's law? Hick's law is kind of a really important thing both when you're designing for the web and when you're designing for mobile. Especially, it's a really great way of kind of getting a sense of where this breaks down. Hick's was a designer and a mathematician who formulated a way of describing the problem that people have when they're confronted with too many choices. And this goes back to some famous studies that were done in the 70s where they did the soap thing and they presented all these different choices. And it actually could be used in a very nefarious way to give people too many choices in an advertising sense and then be able to try to control the outcome of their decision. You overwhelm them until the point they can't decide anymore. Hicks actually formulated it mathematically, and he found that it was actually a logarithmic function, and it had to do with a simple formula. It's the time that it takes to make any decision is absolutely mathematically defined as a simple constant times the logarithm of the number of choices plus 1. So if you only have one choice, it's going to take you, the time is going to be basically log 2, right? Then there's a constant that no matter what they're deciding between, if you're deciding places to go on a website or you're deciding between like items on a menu in a restaurant, does not matter. Each of those will have a constant and the curve will only shift. And it's absolutely consistent whether you're deciding between 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things, 4 things, and it goes up really fast. So if you're presenting on a menu items, you're like, oh, we have to create a navigation system, right? We have to have everything in the navigation system. We have 10 menus across, and they're 5 deep and 7 deep and then nested 3, and this is great. Anyone can get to anywhere they need to go, right? And it's going to take them seconds out of their life to be where, what, who, And if you compare that to a mobile experience, simply impossible to implement. Mobile experiences, by their very nature, have to comply with things like Hick's law. We won't get into things like a time complexity, which has to do with whether the time it takes for people to interact with your websites, it happens in a linear time, or it happens in a logarithmic time, or behind the scenes, the algorithms that you're using to implement those functions, how long it takes those algorithms to execute. Computation speeds are increasing faster than bandwidth. This is something that's absolutely influencing the way we're building web applications because our processing power is getting much faster than our ability to move data. And that's not just because we have bad reception here in Vermont. I mean, it's the actual building out networks that can handle the kind of data we want to move around is always going to lag behind the processing power that you can put in a handheld device. So more and more we want to design applications that take advantage of that processing power and don't move a lot of stuff around, right? You're going to have a high cost for moving things around. You're going to have a low cost for doing calculations locally. This is why things like we're moving to front-end based jQuery and even JavaScript jQuery based things, more so than Ajax. You want to have everything happen in the app, right? Then you want to call over some data, bring it down, and then handle all the processing again locally. Finally, the final assumption we can make is, let's see, that you're well acquainted with FLOSS and GPL. Yes? Oh, come on. People. Open source content management systems. One of the great things that Jason showed me earlier today is that if you look at the top CMSs on the web today, you find that they're almost entirely, the top ones are almost entirely open source content management systems. And that was not true even a few years ago today when Google sent out their very, very proprietary, very secret sauce spiders around the web to find out who was using what. And it turns out that's a very difficult problem to solve. Even for Google, it was very hard for them to determine, go to every single website and find out what kind of software they're using. So these are some of the assumptions that we make. In some cases, it's very good to make assumptions. In other cases, we find it's not so good. Really great way of kind of getting to the differences between frameworks, management systems, Drupal, Joomla, and WordPress is summed up in a quote that I like, and maybe even everyone here can complete it for me. So I'll do the first two, and someone came up with it. Okay, you use WordPress if you want to build a blog. Use Drupal if you want to build WordPress. And here's the part where you get to complete. Use Joomla if ... someone call it out.
Manage both.
Okay, more. Give me a couple. Give me 3 to pick from, please.
You want to build Drupal?
We are dreaming in the third row. Okay, so I've got use Joomla if you want to manage things, use Joomla if you're dreaming, and use Joomla if you want to migrate, I don't know. And I would add a fourth to that. Yes?
Do you want your client to be able to enter their own content?
It's a good one. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. I think all 3 of them do it, but I think the point here is that it's kind of really important to come to a definition or a sense of what Joomla does and what it does really, really well, and what it does really, really well that maybe the other systems don't do.
Who came up with the ones that use Drupal if you want to build WordPress?
I can't necessarily take credit for that. You do take.
Well, I wonder who did.
Oh, you want to track them down?
Can they really do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say you can build
Absolutely.
80-90% of it. Yeah, that's the thing, and that's the really amazing thing about it.
Of course, with Drupal 7, it'll take about 9 years to load, but
right. So one of the absolute strengths of the Drupal system is the community. And in fact, they have a slogan, which the original slogan was "Come for the code, stay for the community." I've actually found that many people actually do it the other way around. The community is so strong and so embracing, so helpful, that some people come for the sheer community, and then they get into the code. But it turns out that we've actually changed that slogan. It's no longer because I was going to put a slide here from the Matrix. Who comes for the code, right? I mean, it doesn't make it. That's why I'm saying people would come for the community, right? But who comes like, oh, I want the code, right? I want to get into all this stuff that's going to drive me, crazy trying to figure out. No. So actually, if you go to the website today, it's changed. It's come for the software, right? Because people will come for software. I don't think you're going to find a high level of people coming for code because they're really excited about having to learn how to build something.
0 and a 1 next to each other.
Right. Yes. Yes. Exactly. Yes.
See, in this area, there's such a community of Joomla. In this particular area.
Absolutely.
Joomla's
Absolutely.
community.
And that's
what that was going to be about. Was Joomla.
It could be. You just have to replace all the pictures. There you go. And I think also the size of your community leverages something called network effects. Does everyone know what network effects are? Network effects is another mathematical thing where you're looking at the connectedness between nodes, and you're looking at what emerges out of that. So if you have 2 people, a series would be like 1, 3, 6. It's a mathematical series. So if you have 2 people, there's only one connection between them. There's only one thing that can happen, right? You have 3 people, there's actually three connections, right? 1, 2, 3. You have 4 people, and all of a sudden you're up to 6 connections, right? So we have all these connections between 4 people. It's like now you start adding people, and the network effects goes up. Bob Metcalf, who actually is the inventor of the Ethernet protocol, which is heavily used to, like all of you using right now if you're connected on the internet, formulated this as a power law. All these are various power laws, and they're ways of figuring out how we model networks, what emerges out of networks, and what those connections are. And he formulated Metcalfe's law, which explains how these networks, when they grow, increase in value. So he translated the mathematical power law into how they increase in value. And this is what we're seeing happening in the internet. This is why the internet is exploding so fast. It's not just, oh, I can upload and download pictures of cute cats. It's everything is becoming connected. Everything's happening faster and faster and faster. And as we move from the World Wide Web of interlinked hyper documents to a system where it's actual servers talking to each other in machine language about things that are going on in the real world using the sensors in your phone as data collection points, you're going to find it's going to take, the next shift is going to happen even faster. Inside of the community and inside of all communities, and even on the web, we have this thing which we can model as a social onion. And this is talking about the value of the connection. So as all these connections grow in the community that you're using to build these platforms, you're going to find that at the heart of it, you're going to find a sphere of collaboration, of people you're working very, very closely with, and people that you have an investment with. You know, you share wins with them. With collaboration, mutual wins, there's a mutual investment. Outside of that, you have advocacy, because presumably you're very excited about the things that you're working on, whether it's Joomla, whether it's Drupal, and you're advocating them. Outside of that, there's just a private dialogue. So you're not out in the world saying, hey, Joomla's really great, hey, Drupal's really great, you should use it, but you're talking amongst each other yourself. You say, hey, this is really great software, we should really use it a lot. Or, hey, how do we define it better? So people, you're not going to go out and advocate defining it better, right? You're not going to go out to the world and say, hey guys, we need to define what we are. But internally, you're going to have a private dialogue saying, we need to define Joomla a lot better in terms of what it is and where it's going, so that we can take that advocacy out to what? A public dialogue, right? With people who are not invested in the project, they're not even really probably involved in the project, but may want to know about the project. And then beyond this, you have things like, you've got the sphere of, that's the sphere of collaboration, you move into a sphere of engagement of people that you're sort of involved with, that may know about Joomla, they may know about things, they may have an interest in it, they may be following it, they may be just barely appreciating it, and then you get out to a sphere of exposure and people might not even be interested, but they're at least aware of it, and then at the very edges, people that are unaware of it and just encounter it. And then we find that the social onion of community maps really, really well to the way the internet works, it maps really, really well to the way technology works, and you can actually start to predict, make technological predictions based on how fast computational power is changing to know where we're going to be in a few years, and depending upon how far out you are, these technological predictions will either be linear at the heart, or they're going to break down, they're going to be nonlinear at the edges, where you're not sure exactly how those increases in technical computation are going to translate into things we can do. But make no mistake about it, this has been happening all along. I mean, technology isn't something that just came along one day when we invented, video cameras and computer chips and the World Wide Web. Technology is something that's always been with us, and it's always had a growth curve. And right now, it's powering web development so that people that don't necessarily even have a background in computer science, that maybe did not work on IBM mini computers, can actually just build websites. This is both a strength and a weakness, because then you also have the problem that people think they can build something that they can't build. And that's not a problem until you promise it to a client, which is the problem I see going on both in the Drupal and the Joomla worlds. Promising delivery of something you don't know how to deliver because you're pretty sure it can't be made. This is a really nice way of looking at things. It's a really nice way of looking at the way we communicate, collaborate with, and engage with people on the internet. But if you really want to know what the internet looks like, it looks like nothing like that, right? So it's like, you're like, oh, this is so beautiful. It's an onion. We're collaborating. We're engaging. And then you get to, oh, holy, what is going on? And this is what we're trying to build for. We're trying to build for the real social web. And you can see some of them. And this is the kind of stuff, this is an example of the kind of stuff we're really modeling. I mean, when we're building websites, I mean, we're not really, the goal here as we get out in a few years and we build the internet, the web, the giant global graph, it's really not to build a place where someone can write an article. It's really, it's really not, to put up a pretty website that's got a flower shop where there are flowers and here's where to buy flowers and here's our hours. These are all really good uses. But when you get into the complex data modeling that's happening right now as the World Wide Web gives rise to the giant global graph, and as the web gives rise to mobile, which is quantitatively and qualitatively different, these are the kind of graphs we're going to see more and more of. The actual what's really going on, the real connection. You're going to find things at global like data-driven modeling. You're going to find metrics about metrics. You know, what we found recently, like when we're fighting terrorism, you know, the content-focused way of fighting terrorism is like, find out who's saying the word bomb, right? Oh my God, you got to go to who said bomb? I kicked off the airplane, right? You got to tap everybody's conversations and see if anyone says the word, right? It's an impossible problem to solve. All the computation power in the world, I cannot go through all of those conversations and find out who's a terrorist based on who's talking to someone on the telephone about bomb. But now, if I just map who's talking to who, and if I find any one known node who I know is a bad node, all of a sudden I see where they're talking to. If I see multiple connections with bad nodes, I don't have to waste any of that computational power. And that same example cuts through to everything. The content-focused way is giving rise to a network-focused approach to things. And as we are building content management systems, it's really important to understand where they fit into web ecology and where the model of content management breaks down. Now, how do we handle all this complexity? Well, we don't handle it in the interface, right? Because we want the interface to be cute kittens and pretty flower shops and nice articles, and we can't put this stuff in the interface. Although you will find that there's a lot of really amazing JavaScript libraries out there to display this kind of information, and even using things like HTML by Canvas to display it right in the browser. But we want to handle all this complexity in the database. And this is a depiction of the Drupal database schema for a core install. So one difference that you may find in the Drupal and Joomla communities, although I don't think it's probably as significant as some would say, is you're going to find a high number of people in the Drupal development world that know this, like it's in their brain. Like if you're always on Denver at DrupalCon, if you ask them, you know, who Manning is, you know, there's like huge news in Denver, like will not know, you know. But if you ask them, you know, how the history table, you know, what column in the history table connects to what column in the users table, they will actually know. And they may even know that it's a UID, and they won't confuse it with a VID, and they'll actually know that a VID can be a version ID, or it can be we got term IDs. There's some examples here where they actually use the same name for different terms. You see, I'm sure vocabulary ID and version ID is a great example. They're both VIDs. So in code, you're always working with VIDs. Are you referring to vocabulary or a version? The idea then is to take the schema and make, using RDF, using the semantic web, using HTML5, turning the internet into one giant database that you can then query. So imagine a future where, you know, your web management system is not simply displaying an article that someone posted, but it's actually running queries in an application, running in a mobile browser or a web browser against a database somewhere, and it's actually asking about things in the world. And it's not asking the database that's storing stuff about the world. So you have you've got your request, right, coming in from a person. You've got like the world where all that data is being collected from. And then the idea is that it somehow goes into a database, and that's that other thing. And then we kind of like ask the database. It's not really like that. The database isn't something that's out there, outside of the request and the data itself about the world. It's between. And the only reason we think of it as being outside is because it's buffered, it's mediated, there's a lag, right? But the database is actually just a way of buffering all the information we have about the world. It's actually in between, and as the web evolves, it's going to become closer and closer and closer to real-time querying. And this is when we hear about things like, you know, the Kurzweil's promotion of the singularity, not his original idea, but something that we hear talked about a lot. This is what the singularity is, right? It's all this stuff approaching real time. And what are all of these data collection points? Content. They're nodes. You know, there's actually a big debate in Drupal when we launched 7, and it was, okay, can we finally stop calling them nodes? Because no one wants to know about a node. Your end users don't want. People you're building websites for do not want to. I mean, who here has a client that you could present a web platform to, and you could convince them to call everything on their site a node? Right? They would, right? And in fact, you know, nodes aren't even nodes. You know, we use nodes as this kind of shorthand for a data primitive, but in communications theory, a node is absolutely not a primitive. A node is something that does work. A node is something where information comes in, work happens, something is decided, and then it gives a different signal out, right? If the same information is going through the node and the node doesn't change, it's not a node, it's a switch, right? More importantly, Drupal got the idea that everything's a node, right? Wouldn't this be a great model, right? Oh, an article's a node, a tweet's a node, a music file's a node, a video's a node. Everything's a node. It's beautiful, right? It turns out it really doesn't work that way. And this was a model that Drupal got committed to early on, and then it became apparent that it breaks down, that a node is absolutely not a data primitive. You need things like fields. And so in Drupal 7, with the CCK system now is in core, and it's a field construction set. It's an API for using fields. And so any node is just a collection of fields. It's just rows and columns in a database, and it's a key and a value, an entire set of those, and you define a node. And the reason it's my God, it's full of nodes, is because there's no node there, right? Early on, a node is what? It's a title, a body, and then any stuff you want to put on that. But then as we move to a system where a node is just a collection of fields, right? You take away the title and body. You do have a stock content type on the box, but the actual data model, there's nothing there. If you take away all the fields, there's nothing left. There is no node. A node is just the collection. The object node is just the collection of fields. And that's actually takes us through our next slide of what is this node thing. I mean, it's a web page, except web pages don't really exist, right? I mean, does everyone here agree that web pages don't exist? I guess not. Wrong. We've got a few. And hopefully a lot of you understand that there is a world of difference between building a website and building a web application. And some of the differences are subtle, and some of the differences are very technical, but at the end of the day, to be aware of them is to be able to build things that are very future-facing. And I think that's one of the things that Joomla really needs right now, is to be future-facing. So this is probably about as complicated a slide or a data, an infographic as you really need to get a sense of what the Drupal system is, maybe even how it compares to the Joomla system. I mean, I feel like pretty much no one in the room is going to be at the level where they're going to be like diving into the schema slides. But this gives us really kind of just the basic components, right? You've got a node, and for some reason, it's really important for context and for comments to be first-class objects in the data system, right? For some reason, when we're building these systems, it's really important for commenting. And in Drupal, they're first-class objects, just like nodes are, just like taxonomic terms are. Taxonomic terms, another first-class citizen. Again, really just a field on a node. Nodes.
Are people familiar with that term? They're basically tags, ways to group things together, and a node can have multiple layers of taxonomy. So you might be keywords, or it might be category, or it might be user type, or you can make your own taxonomy.
And it's something you really have to grok, because taxonomies are fields, but not all fields are taxonomies. And you kind of have to grok how data needs to be modeled to know when it's a taxonomic categorization and when it's something just a field of text. Like you have cars. Car can be a Honda, and inside of a Honda it could be a Civic. That seems really clear. It's a taxonomic system. But a car can also have an AC. A car can have air conditioning, radio. It could have fancy hubcaps. And those really aren't taxonomic. Without getting in deep diving into the example too far, we don't tend to classify cars as has fancy hubcaps or doesn't. Those are fields that apply. The AC is an option. So there's no absolute answers here, but there is the absolute question that you have to resolve when you're building sites of what layers are taxonomic, where are you classifying content, and where are you fielding the content when you're putting stuff on it. Then of course over here you have users and roles. Obviously we know that this is one of the things that put Drupal way out ahead, was having this role-based access permission system, which didn't come along in Joomla until 1.6. And at that point it's almost too late for a lot of purposes, because that is so important in the enterprise, that is so important in academia, that is so important in our evolving permissions-based culture, our access-based culture. As capitalism, the idea of things being owned gives rise to hyper-capitalism, where you don't own anything, do you have the right to access that? Are you allowed to be reading that content? Do you have the right to watch that movie, or is the FBI going to bust down your door? I mean, this is so deeply baked into our culture of identity, that to have had this role-based permission system deeply baked into Drupal put them out ahead, such that all of a sudden now you see all the major institutions having committed to it, because it's really, really important for their models. Then down here, of course, is the system, which is really just doing housekeeping. It's keeping everything in order. This is not a big engine here. This is almost a very, very thin layer. Drupal is a 404 page, that's served up if nothing's there. I mean, the actual engine here. I mean, if you go to a Drupal site, you don't have any modules enabled. You don't have any content. I mean, the index, the dispatcher really just walks through it. So, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this? Nope. You get a 404 page, and that's really all the engine is doing, housekeeping, because it's asking all of the modules over here, hey, are you doing anything? Without them, there's nothing. And then it's also right here, fundamentally, as an important part, locale. Very, very important, because we are building not the giant US graph, or not the giant United States root DNS server, or the SOBA control the internet. We're building a giant global graph. It's really important that the systems we build are fully internationalized. And then up at the top, there's our presentation layer. So without getting into the flow here so much, your menu handles your requests. Your blocks are going to generally be responsible for returning that content, presenting it on the page, and then they're themed, right? So that they actually look themed. If you look at the request cycle, who here kind of gets a sense of how this might even map to Joomla? I just wondered where we are with this. So this is really getting into, and I've got a whole mix of kind of slides in here. Maybe they're not in the right order. And I've got slides on like, oh, how do you install it? How do you just build a site? And then I've got sites where I've got some slides like, what is this stuff doing, right? Because I mean, you load up the software and you press go, and then like this bar goes, la la la, installing. We're processing. What is it doing? Like, what's going on there, right? We just click the button, and we know it's doing something, and we know it's supposed to do something, and then we're done. We have a framework that we can build a website for. What's really going on? Same thing with the request cycle. We know that we build a web page, someone goes to the browser, and there's the page, and it's beautiful, and it's just like we themed it. But how did it get that way? And one of the fundamental differences between Drupal and Joomla is in the Drupal world. I mean, I think there are a lot more. I think we've already kind of like acknowledged that it's more programmatic. There are more programmers, and they have a deeper familiarity with the request cycle, which is baked into the HTTP protocol, into HTML, into the conception of what the web is. And it starts with a request, hopefully, for a RESTful resource. Hopefully it's RESTful in your case, but you're going to make a request against a resource to a server. That request is going to hit what's called a callback. It's going to have something, an API path or something that it's going to ask for, right? And if it's RESTful, hopefully it'll be nicely formatted. If you work with both systems, you may have seen, or even if you've gone to the internals, how the search engine optimization, search engine friendly URLs happen, and who's responsible for answering the request, right? So you have a dispatcher, which is basically in the index is doing some routing and handing off to a dispatcher, an underlying dispatcher was saying, okay, I've got a request coming in from a web browser. How do I answer it? How do I even know where it's coming from? And in Joomla, it's going to hand it off to a component, right? It's going to say, okay, who's got this? Same thing in Drupal. It's basically going to say, who's got this? So the request comes in, and every module in Drupal has registered its callbacks. So what it's saying, I am authoritative for all the following requests. If these web addresses come in, these are the callbacks. I get them, right? And then inside of that, it's going to say, and when I get them, I want you to run this function, and then at the end of when that function completes, it's going to return something, which in Drupal is going to be an array. At some point, it could be an object. And that array is then going to get passed around, and they get passed to the next one. Okay, I've got this array. I need to find out, okay, does the person or the client that issued the request, do they have permissions to see this array? Okay, great, so I'm going to hand it off to the next one. Oh, well, do they have special permissions, or do I need to process the array some way? Do I need to set a value in there that changes the localization value of the array? Let's see, what have I got there? I'm looking, oh, I restarted this, so my time's off.
That's what it is.
Okay.
It is 2:30.
Oh, it's 2:30.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if we have 5 minutes, I'm going to show all the rest of my slides.
Okay.
There
Got
we go.
5 minutes. Watch
There we
quickly.
go. There you go. Installations. You need one of these. Not a little one. No, you need a big one. So 4 steps: download, create database, fix permissions, run install. You can clone it using Git. It's actually a very easy way. Even better, there's a drush system that you can use in one command to install Drupal. If you don't have drush, you can use pair to install drush. If you don't have pair, you can use yum to install pair. If you don't have yum, you're out of luck. And that's a joke, obviously. And so you install Drush. That's a one-click command just to install it. Obviously, we front-loaded all of the hard stuff first in front of the presentation. So we didn't get to things like, oh, this is just the installer, right? This is just the way it looks to install. And then
Emulating Drupal then, all the hard stuff in the first part of the presentation.
yes. Yeah, we didn't get to,
It was a good simulation.
yeah, we didn't. Yes, exactly. That's right. And I think that's really. I think what's your name?
Cindy.
Cindy's really made such a great point here. Is that the learning curve in Drupal is really front loaded. It's something that it takes a while to get through, but as soon as you get through it, all of a sudden, it becomes really apparent, it becomes really easy. And I encourage anyone, for the remainder that you come up and ask me like questions specific about implementation, installation, and how things work. But really, Cindy's exactly right. If you can make it through all that, then you've got it, right? And then you have this, and you don't necessarily have to know the schema, but it's going to be there, and it's going to be on your website.
My experience is it's about 2 months long. If you're doing a couple hours of reading a day, a couple hours of tinkering a day, most people that on my team that come on that aren't familiar with Drupal, either they had no CMS experience or they came from a different CMS. It takes about 2 months to get to proficiency. And then once you're there, you can start to do some amazing things. And none of this stuff comes up usually in the first couple of months. But
None of that.
It takes a good 6 months.
Yeah, none of that's going to come up in your first 2 months.
Yeah, but at that point you're comfortably installing modules, you're using Drush, or we use AcquiSVN to install, and that way we're always getting an up-to-date version of it. You're installing, you're tweaking things, you're tweaking templates. It's a pretty short learning curve. It's pretty comparable to anything else, WordPress, Joomla, I would say. There's nuances though.
Well, thanks everyone. I guess I'll expect to hear from everyone in 2 months. Very important as a